Today, I'm on Salvation on Mount Seymour on the North Shore of Vancouver with skinny connoisseur Dangerous Dave, who you've probably seen him on Instagram. I'll have it linked down below, as well as his YouTube channel. And today we're going to be going through Salvation, probably one of the trickiest trails here on the shore, and he's going to show us how he rides it. And this is the trail that he's chosen to ride for the GoPro Best Line Contest, which I'll have linked down below. It's on Pink Bike and you can vote for Dave down there. He's going to take us through how he rides each of these features, and you know what? We're going to get to see him give a couple of them a go. And hopefully after this video, you'll appreciate just how hard it is to ride this trail and how much crazier it is with the speed that he rides this trail at. Not something I'm ever going to do. So let's get to it. Whew.
Alrighty, so this trail is called Salvation. It was built by Mark Rowe, I think sometime in early to mid 2000s. It's kind of before my time that I was mountain biking, so we'll just take a little walk through. So the trail starts up here, just come down Corkscrew, and this is the first feature here. You just get into a couple beams they have strung out. This trail has seen some better days, as you can see here. I think we lost part of this skinny earlier this year. I think when I rode it, it was just cracked, so the line just keeps getting more difficult. Comes down here. A lot of these things are a little bit off camber, like you can see this one just kind of shoots you off to the right, so it's really just a challenge to kind of maintain your speed, maintain a good line through the middle. Get onto this one. This one's really bouncy. It's got some spring to it, so you pretty much have to be really smooth when you're pedaling through here, like no sudden movements or else it kind of gets, you can get bucked. Next we come into this pretty cool section here. There's a little wood cutout, ride around, whatever you want to call it, to get around this tree. So I actually rode this trail 2 years ago for the contest and had a really big crash here. So it's pretty tight, and when you're trying to come through with a lot of speed, you really have to be pretty much perfect to shift your weight. Like I'll start leaning the bike, counterbalance for a minute, and as soon as I get towards the tree, cut the handlebar to the right, make it around this tree, and then swing back over and keep your balance. Now I jumped off the side a whole bunch of times here, had a really tough time with this part. And when I crashed, I was just going way too fast, and I think what happened was, as I came around, I knew I wasn't gonna make the rest of the turn, so I was just gonna drop to flat, and out of the corner of my eye, I just see this big stump here. And I guess I just hadn't really picked up on it. I mean, it was far enough away from me that I thought, you know, it shouldn't be a big deal, but when I was coming to pull up, that caught my attention just long enough for me to just pause for a split second. So when I went to pull up, my front tire had already just started to creep over the edge. So when I went to push down to get some leverage, my front tire just kind of sunk down, and you can see in the video, it's like that worst case scenario you have going off a drop where the front wheel comes up and then it just starts to tank down. And it's not really something I've had to deal with before. Like, I know that these crashes do happen, but that was the first time it happened to me, and I was just hanging on for dear life. Luckily, when I hit the bottom down here, my front tire hit first, and that impact jarred my hands off the bar, so I could kind of get my hands up and brace some of the fall, but it was pretty scary. I remember lying here after the crash, and I could just hear this really awkward moaning sound, and I didn't know what it was, and it took me a few seconds to realize that I was actually making that sound. So it was really scary. I mean, I ended up with fractured vertebrae, separated shoulder, and a sprained thumb. And I'm a physiotherapist, and so I know the mechanism for spinal cord injury, and that was really the first thing that came into my mind. So, you know, it's a pretty sobering reminder that there are risks. They're not just theoretical, they can happen, and this is kind of how they happen. But luckily I wasn't too worse for wear. I'm all good now, but at the time it was pretty scary. So give you a sense of how tight this line is. If I put my bike on here, you kind of see, I mean, wheelbases keep getting longer, so these lines are probably designed around a very short, you know, early 2000s free ride bike. but you know, when you come in here, there's really not much space at all to get around this tree without hitting your bar. And I know these beams look like they come out this far, but after they've been around for 15 or so years, I wouldn't put too much weight on the outside. I try and kind of keep it in this supported section just along here. And it's tough too because the wheelbase is so long. When you try and cut out, it's really tough to keep your back tire on here as well. So what I started doing on this bike is I'll actually come in this way and then I'll do a little pivot, swing my back tire over just so I stay on the line, and that kind of sets me up a little bit better. Come around the outside and then onto the next section. So after you ride that beam, that section that we just came through, go around the tree, you come along here, kind of more of the same here, a really nice log ride that's sort of been chewed away by time. And then this enters into the next really cool feature, which is the massive teeter-totter. So when you come to the end of this log ride, there's a little elevated ladder bridge section. Now this is sort of still under construction or under repair. So there's a couple missing rungs here. For my video, I just kind of laid them down flat. I didn't have any nails, so you might see me slow down a tiny bit for this section, that's why. So you come across there. This part is relatively high, you know, on either side. You get like a 6, possibly 8-foot drop depending on where you fall. This is kind of a cool section here. You come between these two trees. It's not too bad, it's relatively wide, but you still kind of have to shimmy your shoulders through to make it up here. And then you come to really like one of the most iconic features of this trail, which is this massive teeter-totter. It's missing a couple rungs here and there, but it's pretty stable. You don't have to be too worried. So you come out on here, pivot point is right here in the middle, and then comes down. Now the counterbalance isn't working quite as well as it used to, so sometimes you just sort of have to do a manual reset and flatten her out again. So after you finish the teeter-totter, you come onto this section here. This is just one like really long log ride. There's an extra little option off to the side here. So you can kind of pivot over here, come onto this little S-curve section, which is pretty cool. You can see how old this is just by how much moss is on all the woodwork here, but it's really not something you ride in the wet. It's pretty much a dry weather only trail. You come around and you do a few more pivots. I usually pivot maybe once or twice, get lined up for this next section that gets a little bit skinnier. So you walk along here or ride along here. Depending on how long your wheelbase is, it will kind of dictate how many pivots you need to do. Probably get about one here, and then you come next to this tree, and again, just like on the upper part of the trail, it's really tight. You only have maybe an inch or two. I cut my bars to 760 mils, so it's a little bit easier, but even then it's pretty tight. So come around the corner, a couple more pivots. When I try and do this, I use my trial skill to really get me through here and try and keep going fast. So what I'll do is I'll lean forward, start to put a little bit of a pedal kick in to keep my momentum going, and then as I'm coming forward, that's also my weight shift so I can get the pivot in. So I'm making all these pivots around here, but still trying to keep that forward momentum to keep the speed up. Then you come onto this last section, a little ladder bridge, again, super tight. If you look in the video, you can see my front tire is usually like right on this outer edge here, just trying to navigate around this big tree. And then you come around, this last bit is really the trickiest section. I mean, if you ride this just as a straight log ride, it's just a nice send right off the end. If you're coming through here, a couple different ways of doing it, but whichever way, you really only get about a bike length, maybe a bike length and about a foot or two extra. So what I do is I come in here, try and keep my momentum as much as I can, and then I'll kind of pivot while still trying to keep going forward, get the back tire on here, and that sets me up so I have about 2 feet or so to just get a little bit of a roll, and I sort of do like a trial Z pedal kick move to keep my speed and send off the end of the log. The drop's probably, I don't know, let's see. You'd probably land about here, so I don't know, 6 feet-ish, depending on how fast and how far you're going. So the next big feature on this trail is this massive wall ride. So you kind of come over this little hump. You can jump part way if you want to and kind of end up down here. And then there's a couple options for this wall ride. Now, I've never actually seen anyone ride the upper section, like the top of the upper section. I'm sure it's theoretically possible, but again, I'm still waiting. So if anyone knows someone who's done it, please let me know, because I'd love to see it. It looks pretty awesome. What I usually do is I'll come in kind of on the midpoint of this, right about where this crack is. So come in high, stay just along this area here. Sometimes I'll come up and ride the lower part of this, but it gets a little bit bumpy on this top section. Like, you can't really tell in the video, but there's a few parts where it's not quite as smooth and just feel like you lose a bit more speed. So to carry enough speed for the next section, again, I usually stay just along here. And then really from here, like, you have this little uphill section that comes into another bank. So right about here, I just start pedaling as hard as I can to try and keep my speed up and keep going for the next section. So this next section, again, come around here, it's a little bit of an uphill, so you really got to keep your speed. I try and take the high route just because it looks and feels cooler. So I just pedal as much as I can right around the outside bank. And then it's really fun feeling just to kind of bank off to the right and drop off the end of this. You have to be pretty careful because even in the dry, it's really slippery, especially when there's a few needles and some dirt on the lower section, so be aware before you ride it. Alrighty, so next section after the wall ride, you come along this ladder bridge here. Couple options at this point. You can just straight roll down here onto this log ride. Depending on how fast I'll come, I can, just to make it look more fun, I'll either do a wheelie drop down, or if I'm going really fast, I'll just kind of send it in just a straight drop and almost try and land front tire first, just because you need to get back on this log and get control as quickly as possible. You just kind of nose dive in. This log is kind of broken and leaning, so everything kind of tilts to the right. Plus there's this break in the middle here. Yeah, so you don't have much space. As soon as you get on here, you got just over a bike length. Then you have to deal with this. And it's got these really cool, I don't know, we'll call them an A-frame, I guess. So you're on the log ride, then you have to ride up and over this little skinny A-frame piece here. And there's 2 more of them down along the way. And the last one, if you hit it just right, you can actually just kind of pop, jump the last section, transition down onto the ladder bridge, onto the next area. So this is the last wooden section of the trail. It's probably the scariest. So I mean, I'm biased. The scariest part is where I had my big crash, but this is probably the next scariest for me just because it's high and wobbly, as we'll show you. So you come down this little plank here, off the rock onto the ladder bridge. And then you come into this uphill section here. I mean, the log is pretty rotted, so you got a little bit of extra tech to maneuver through here. This part is where it starts to get pretty scary because, I mean, this is wobbly, plus you're pedaling uphill, and you know, you get up to the point where you probably have like 8 to 10 foot fall if you screw up. So just make sure you're dialed in and don't skip any gears or slip out a back tire. So once you're up here, this is the highest part. Up ahead, there's like one little jump and then another gap jump from the skinny. So as scary as it is, you pretty much have to keep your speed. And I usually throw in a couple pedal strokes along here as well. So this is the first, I don't know, I'll call it like a mini gap. I'm sure that back in the day, this was filled with dirt, so you had a bit of a landing. That dirt is long gone, but same idea. Come jump off here. This log's reasonably wide, but at the same time, like, it's pretty slippery along the edges and it gets a little rough, so you know, you best stay right here in the middle. Try and get in your last couple pedal strokes. And and then jump the gap. So it's not too bad as far as gap jumps go, but I don't know. I don't really want to fall in here if I can avoid it. So the last part of the trail, you've cleaned all the woodwork, you're out of the woods, you come out into this open, kind of clear-cut section just under the power lines. This was probably my most hated section of the trail because, you know, if you had done a really clean run on all the woodwork, everything was dialed, all the hard parts of the trail, you'd come along here and then you'd hit something like this, just a tiny little log just sticking out of the bushes there, enough to kind of throw you off, ruin your entire run. You walk back up to the top and do it again, and just keep repeating over and over and over until you get a nice clean dialed run. And there's other little stuff like just through here, you can just kind of see it peeking out of the bushes there waiting to grab you. All you hear as you come through this section is just the sound of your handlebar, pedals, everything getting caught in the bushes. So it's kind of that last little hidden trap that you don't think about after you clear the woodwork, but this part is still really technical, really difficult part of the trail. And then this is the end of the trail. You come over this last little ladder bridge that kind of takes you over this little creek ravine down here at the side. Come out onto the dirt and you're done. And that's salvation.
Awesome.